So welcome to all our participants tonight to the next of in the series of the Preparation for Practice webinars. And today's topic, record keeping, cloud versus desktop. Firstly, I'd like to welcome my co-moderator, Mr. Patrick Lowe. And we have two excellent speakers tonight. Mr. Rafic, Habib, who will talk about clinic to cloud and cloud type record keeping, and Steve Renz from Genie Solutions. He will talk about the desktop record keeping which are non-cloud based. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia, recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and the community. And we pay our respects to them and their cultures and to elders past and present. Before we launch into our presentations for this evening, just a few housekeeping rules. Questions that you have, because to actually answer them at the end of both presentations. If there are questions that come to mind that at the end of the session, then please, by all means, email us and we will try and get responses back to you. The webinars are being taped and you will be able to log on to the college website and download them and watch. So without any further ado, let me introduce our first speaker for tonight, who is Rafic Habib, who will be talking about cloud type record keeping. Take it away, Rafic.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Marlene. Thank you to Rax for hosting tonight. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this presentation. I'm just going to share my screen. I presume everyone can see the right screen. Yep. Okay, so my background is IT services in the healthcare space, and I've been in this space for about 21, 22 years now. And I've seen a lot of space, I will talk about clinic to cloud, but I'll also talk about some of the thinking and from my experience in the space and relative to today and also beyond. When I was thinking about this presentation and about what I want to say, one message comes to mind, which is scrutiny is inevitable, preparation is optional. And you know, you can do a lot of preparations in life, and the healthcare sector is notorious for that. You guys go through years and years and years of preparation. But life continues to test us, and we have to be ready. Early days when I launched Clinic to Cloud, I used to get a lot of people come up to me and say, "Are you guys going to disrupt the space?" And that was the buzzword in technology as a disruptor. And I never enjoyed that term, disruption. I thought of myself and the team that I have as people who care about the space and like to innovate and challenge the space. But when I thought about it in terms of where we are today in the middle of a pandemic and how doctors should prepare for and what is potentially disruption, and then this comes to mind, right? The real disruption is not clinic to cloud, is what life throws at us. And that sort of disruption is gonna approach the healthcare sector, the doctor sector from many angles. This is just one scenario where, like I said, I've been in this space for 21 years. This is the first time I've seen medical practices being disrupted. Medical practice not being able to open their doors. That's never happened before in my career span in healthcare in 21 years. So that got me thinking about many things to do with the space and what we offer and how you think about things. And when I think about a doctor, or doctors think about, going into private practice, they think, I've got my doctorship, my fellowship, and I'm a doctor, and that's your calling. And you need patients, you need staff, and typically you need rooms. Well, today you don't need a room, you just need Zoom, right? And you can run a consult. So the space is being challenged, that you're being asked to reinvent yourself, to think differently about the way you do things. And that's really a disruption. That's what I think of. So in this presentation, I will talk to that. I will talk to some of the challenges that we face, that you're going to face, and we will all continue to face as a result of this. And even without COVID, I think I saw a lot of changes coming towards this space, and I wanted to talk about them. So what is important to note is there is no playbook for this. There isn't a rule book. No one's going to give you an absolute, this is what you do during COVID. So for the first time, as I said earlier, surgery and consults went on hold. And at the same time, so what does that mean from a doctor who's a business owner? You need to revisit your thinking. You need to revisit what do I do about cost versus service? I'm expected to provide a premium service, but my cost is still consistent, but my income is not. And then you think about, do I need to adopt telehealth? And if I adopt telehealth today, what does that mean? Where's my customer base? It used to be my postcode and potentially surrounding postcodes, but what does that mean going forward? I know there are some restrictions around that from the government, but just from a thinking perspective, assuming, what's to say you can't have a private patient call you from Singapore and say, I need your advice. So, and the space is coming under scrutiny, especially in the surgical world, around prems and proms and data-driven outcomes. That was coming pre-COVID anyway. So scrutiny on this sector, and especially the surgeons, is inevitable, and it's coming, and it's going to come from different angles, from Medicare, from payers, from customers' expectations, and you need to be prepared. And then the customer themselves, they have a voice. Their voice is stronger than ever. Social media, and then they can say what they need to say, right? So these are the things I think about, and I think about how do I make a difference in that space? How does somebody like Clinical Cloud make a difference and try and help? And I will cover some of that, but before I go into that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about cloud. So cloud technology is not new. It's not something that came about in the past 5 years since we've come onto the scene. So it's an iteration, and it's an advancement of the way we use the internet. So you have to think about it. So we've been using the internet to submit claims to Medicare and to health funds and send letters across between doctors for the past 20, 30 years, more like 30 years, probably more actually. So we have been using the internet. We've been using it to correspond and transact. But now there's a new version of that use that is more secure, that is more scalable, and they're much easier to deploy. And that's called SaaS, Software as a Service. SaaS technology has been around for about 20 years now. So again, even SaaS itself, Software as a Service, that means you can open a browser, and we're all familiar with browsers. We shop through a browser, we use social media through a browser, and we transact, whether it's travel, which we don't do much anymore, whether it's internet banking. So we do a lot of transactions through a browser today, and we're used to it. And this is a more secure and more scalable and more flexible way of doing things. So it's much easier for you to use. Most people are familiar with it. So that is the true cloud solution that we talk about today. Some examples of that are obviously us, Clinic to Cloud, but other examples you might be familiar with are like Xero, the accounting application. And Salesforce is in there as number 3. The reason I included Salesforce in there is because they were pretty much the first software as a service application to at a large scale, and they've been around for just over 20 years now. So they're the pillar of SaaS, so to speak. Now, with these things in mind, what do I want to, what are some of the messages, what are some of the whys that you can take away from talking about SaaS and cloud technology? So these are the 3 takeaways. A contactless and safer medical practice for yourself, for your staff, and for your patients. The second point, and a very important point, and a point that I'm passionate about, is better patient engagement. So going forward, engaging with your patients electronically is a critical and important function that you need to think about, and you need to discover how you can best do that. I jokingly say to doctors often when I present, you need to engage with your patients, because if you won't, someone else will, like Dr. Google. And then the third point, an agile medical practice, a cost-effective, agile, light medical practice is important for you to think about. You want to go into private practice, and you want to do that in the best possible way. And one of the burdens that you don't want is obviously the IT side of things. I touched on some of these points, but I'd like to explore them a little bit further. So cost effectiveness. If I think about the sector being under pressure to perform, then cost comes up, and doctors want to maintain a control around their spending, especially when you're setting up new. So a big advantage, software as a service, is that it's light to embrace. You don't need servers, you don't need IT costs, and if you're starting with sessional sessions across multiple practices, again, it's ideal. You walk in, you can use any device, you log on, you can have part-time staff, full-time equivalent staff being able to support you wherever they need to be. They don't have to be in the same location as you. Quality of care, so cost versus quality of care. So no one here, we're very lucky in Australia. We have some of the best doctors in the world. We have one of the best health systems in the world. So no one worries about the quality of care. We know that our doctors are good. But quality of care doesn't mean whether or not you can operate, does not only mean whether or not you're a good surgeon. It also involves other aspects of what you do in your practice, like the last one, which is communication. How did I get my results? How did my surgery go? Did your staff follow up on things? And these are things I'll explore a bit more in the next few slides. Work flexibility. So that was initially a quality of life point that I put on there. But when I think about the new norm, and I think about you and your responsibilities, you have a fiduciary duty to your patients, but you also have a fiduciary duty to your staff. Keeping your staff safe and making sure you have a contactless environment is an important aspect of running a medical practice as a business. So if you have 2 staff, for example, do you need both of them present in the rooms? Can one of them continue to make appointments, do billing, follow up things, practice management remotely? Again, if technology enables it, that's possible. Then you're reducing the exposure on that front for that staff member. Data security. I know there are often concerns around security, and I'll talk a bit more in depth a bit further on. But data security is an incredible responsibility, and if you can outsource it to experts like us, who also leverage bigger companies like Microsoft to host your data and your solutions and provide state-of-the-art encryption and security around it, then again, this is a burden that you can outsource and you don't have to worry about it. And then patient engagement communication, I touched on already, and I'll have a new slide. I'll go a bit deeper into those points in the next few slides. So with that in mind, I am not asking anyone to compromise on the quality of the solution that you're purchasing or the workflows or what you need to run a medical practice. A medical practice is a complex environment, and it deserves the support of the applications to run properly. So we're not saying, just because it's cloud, it's going to be better. We're saying you need to dig deep and engage and make sure that the application is relevant. So you can break it up into some of these components: practice management, scheduling types of appointments, multiple doctors, scanning, one-touch scanning, the ability to manage workflows, surgical workflows. And I've got some slides, some actual screenshots a bit later on. Then on the billing side of things, how seamless is my billing? How easy is it for me to transact? How do I keep an eye on my billing? I'm running a business here as well, and if I can't receive my billings, then my costs don't change. I still have to pay my staff. And then the communication side of things, a very, very big part of the surgical world. I often hear from the guys at Avant, when doctors are facing litigation, it's usually to do with communication more than anything else. Did you get back to that person when you're supposed to? Did something fall through the cracks? So these are the issues you face. And then on the clinical side of things, capturing clinical notes, managing procedures, integration into pathology and imaging, and prescribing if you need to be. So again, I'm not asking anyone to compromise on any of those fronts. I touched earlier on the patient engagement side of things, and this is a bigger topic than ever. Patients want to be involved in their healthcare journey. I used to say the patient is the most underutilized resource in healthcare. They want to do more, but we haven't allowed them to do more. Often practices have staff who are at the front desk. Patient walks in, the patient's handed paperwork, then you're paying someone to sit there and type that information in. So what if the patient was to do all that typing, all that paperwork before they come in, and your staff are focused on meet and greet, patient experience, supporting you in order to see more patients? Then giving access, then that's how the patient portal started with us. But then it slowly evolved. Suddenly practices wanted to give the patients access to medications, to allergies, results only after the doctors reviewed them, documents as needed. And that discussion is now progressing a lot further, especially during COVID. A lot of our doctors are saying, okay, we want to do some screening remotely. We want the patient to ask we want to ask the patient several questions before they show up. And some of the questions are, have they had exposure? Other questions are to do with their treatment. And we want to capture the information and feed it into the patient's file. And then the other thing we need to do, if possible, remotely, is be able to receive money remotely. So that's something we're introducing next month. Now, I can tell you how wonderful cloud is, but I always still get the question that, is it safe? Gartner is a global consulting firm that's done a lot of research around that. And they predicted by 2020 that 95% of cloud security incidents will be the customer's fault. What does that mean? So I read the report and I wanted to relate that to the medical practice. What does it mean tangibly to you in the medical practice? One of the most common things that happens is doctors are too busy. No one wants to remember too many passwords. So as a result, we get lazy with the password, and we'll make it password with a capital P. Please don't do that. Basic things, IT requirements, running antivirus on your devices, educating yourself and your staff around emails. The bank is unlikely to send you an email that says, click here to change your password. Chances are that's a virus. You click on it, you're going to get a virus. So these are, and then updates, you know, there's annoying updates that pop up on your screen, and your computer needs to do an update and shut down, or your phone device, your smartphone device. You need to do those things. And by doing them, then you reduce the risk of viruses, you reduce the risk of having a cyber attack of sorts. Most incidents you'll read about where practices have had a breach, if you've ever been to an Avant presentation, they will demonstrate many cases. Most of them are not cloud related, and most of them the user had accidentally done the wrong thing. Either not installed antivirus, clicked on the email, didn't run updates, didn't do backups. And last but not least, one of my favorites is locking your computer screen. Often doctors walk out of the room, they've got files open, and they leave their screen open, and the patients are still in the consult room and they can see someone else's file. Breach of security, and it causes you unnecessary problems. Very easy fix, but it means you have to retype your password in. And then cyber insurance is an option. I'm seeing a lot more insurers offer that across the board. I want to get a little bit technical here. It feels like time is getting away from me. So letters, workflows are having cloud solutions. It means we have less versions for somebody like us, Clinical Cloud, less versions to support in terms of applications that doctors use. Dr. A uses version 25, Dr. B uses version 23, and then we have to support that. What does that mean? It means we can focus our energy on workflows. One of those workflows is letters the old way. Many of you, or some of you, may have used a dictaphone, digital dictaphone. And then I'd ask doctors, so how do you know what letters you've dictated and what letters you haven't dictated and which patients? And they say, I print out my appointment list, or on my screen, I dictate a letter and I type next to it, LD, letter dictated. Or I cross out Harry's name, I cross out George Clooney's name, etc. And that's how they made it. It's a manual process. So this is just an example. Again, I'm trying to provoke the thinking here. I'm not proposing to have all the answers. So what we did differently is every time you see a patient, depending on the appointment type, first time follow-up, you might do a new letter for every new patient. You might do a new letter for all patients. It's up to you. Then we drop that patient's details in a work list for you. It's called Letters to Create. You click on their name, we automatically link that patient to the referring doctor, to your default template, and you press dictate. You dictate it and you send it. It's encrypted, it's linked to the patient's file, it's part of a work list so you can keep an eye on it. And then it lands in your receptionists or practice managers, whoever looks after your letters, list like this. So they have the letters there. If you're using our voice recognition, then the letter is transcribed and they just review it. Once you've signed the letter, obviously the system changes the status. The letter is signed. You can print it if you want to, or you can send it via secure messaging. So why did I pick letters to give you an example? Because I've been speaking to a lot of GPs, and if this was an open room, not Zoom, I would ask you what you think they complain about. They complain about not receiving the letter back from you. Sometimes they receive it on time, sometimes they don't receive it, or it comes too late after the patient's been back to see them. So this makes me think about, yes, it creates efficiency. Yes, we have voice recognition, but really it's about that communication between you and your referring doctors, and making sure their record is up to date, covers you medical legally, and it creates more referrals for you. So that's one way to think about it. Then the financials. The financials are obviously an important part of the business, but many a time doctors don't want to talk about it. You need to talk about it. This is one report. There are many reports you need to run, but you need to look at your debtors. You need to look at the numbers, how they're stacking up. How much did I bill? How much did I receive? So this is something that you need to, and the tools need to be there. It needs to be easy to do. You need to click a button, look at it, or if you don't want to click the button, you can get someone else to click the button and send it to you as an Excel. But as long as you look at it and it's easy to do. Then I thought it was opportunistic, since I'm speaking to surgeons, to talk about the pending fees estimates. That's another little nugget. We call them nuggets internally. So this report shows you all the fees estimates that you've provided to patients and what the procedure is, and they haven't come back. So do you have anyone in your practice actually looking at that and saying, okay, there's probably, $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 on the table there from a money perspective, or this person actually needs that surgery, and if they're not coming back to me, if they've gone somewhere else, I need to know as well, because did I follow up? So this gives you the opportunity to do a quick follow-up, whether you can call them from here, or you can send an SMS, you can look at the fees estimate, you can check if they've booked an appointment, so are they coming in next week? Then I shouldn't call them, because then I look silly. So I thought it was important to demonstrate that for a surgical group. Mobility for the clinician, for the doctors. I love the term information at the point of care. And I used to think, unless you're in ICU and you're looking at it then it's probably not information at the point of care, but that's not true. Information at the point of care could also be you looking at your schedule on your phone, on your smartphone, and realizing that you're going to see Rafic tomorrow and you have seen them before. And you can look at the clinical record and you walk in prepared. Who's my first patient? Which location am I seeing him at? And have I seen him before? And what time? Again. And then from there's a lot more you can do. Like I said earlier, you can do letters off that. You can communicate between you and your staff. That communication piece. The patient calls, they're distressed about their result. You've got access to that result on the phone, and you can message your staff, and it's audit trailed, and you can tell them to recall the patient. Please ask them to come in. I want to see them ASAP. And depending on your specialty, there's a lot more you can do. You can be doing a ward round. If you do a bedside consult that you can bill for, how do you manage that now? A lot of doctors often either take a piece of paper from the chart and stick it in the top suit pocket, and that probably goes in the wash. What if you could take a photo of the chart? It's secure. Nothing's kept on your phone. You send a task back to your staff, and your staff bill that appointment, that consult, sorry, and then that's also a medical legally properly logged entry. So again, the conversation should be around the solution. It's not an IT conversation. The future of cloud. I get that question a lot. This space has suffered from stagnation for a long time from a software perspective, but going forward, the space is very, very active. Whether it's us, whether it's Genie, everyone is innovating, we're pushing, we're doing more things that are designed to serve you and your patients So I see more decision support happening in the space. I see systems getting smarter, business and artificial intelligence. The BI, the business intelligence, is like the sample that I have on the right-hand side of the screen. So your income reports will be easier to look at. You can see your trends. How am I 104s trending? If your 104s are not trending up, it means your referrers are drying up. You need to be able to work that out very quickly. PREMs and PROMs, patient-reported experience measures and patient-reported outcome measures. Some parts of the sector, in the orthopedic space, for example, they're seeing a lot of that. I'm confident that that's going to happen across all surgical disciplines. More and more PROMs are going to be required. And then I see more tools around medication and treatment adherence and personalized care. So every patient is an individual, and we need to be able to respond to that. And the way we can enable you to respond to that is by providing you with the tools. It's our job to provide the tools. So in summary, don't discount the features. I'm not asking anyone to buy the future. I'm asking you to buy what's available today. Don't underestimate change management when you move systems. Bring your staff on the journey. So don't make the decision on your own. Get them involved. Make sure they understand what's involved. Usually the first 2 weeks are a heavy lift. So make sure you have that engagement. Cloud is less of an IT burden and more of a solutions discussion. How can I be more effective in my practice? How can I create more patient engagement? It is easier to deploy and device agnostic. So it's very important for you the device has to become irrelevant. If you lose your phone in a taxi, what can you do about it? It's a terrible thing, but you don't want to worry about, or your laptop in a taxi, you don't want to worry about whether or not your data is there. You want to be able to jump on and continue to practice with a new device. Patient engagement, I think I've exhausted that. So the message is think about future-proofing your practice, but don't discount on what you need today to be efficient. The last point is your data is your rights. Sorry, were you trying to stop me, Marlon?
It's fine. Yeah, this is your. That's okay. You're almost finished.
Yeah, that's my last slide.
Yeah.
Your data, your rights. So that's a very clear message from me, but it should be a clear message from the industry. And we're part of a industry body that ensures everybody adheres to that. The data is your data, or you're the custodian along with the patient, co-ownership. And always think, whoever you jump in bed with, this is a partnership, and you want them to continue to innovate. And I call that the roadmap, hence that picture. And that's where I live. I live in the roadmap, and my job is to continue to find ways to make the practice better.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for giving us the pros and cons of cloud-based practice software. Part of the webinar series is to open our listeners' minds into the options that are out in the marketplace, and to give them, valuable information about what things are important for them to consider for their own individual practices. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our second speaker today, Steve Renz. Steve from Genie Solutions, and Steve's going to share a different perspective about desktop office-based software. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for having me tonight. It was a great presentation from Rafic there. So not sharing sort of conflicting information has already been talked about. Genie provides both desktop and cloud-based software. So we're in the same place as Client to Cloud. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about more of a practical guide to software selection and things that you can look for when you're selecting software. So I've got about 25 minutes, so I've got a lot to cover. So I'll go pretty quickly, but I encourage you to ask questions, and I'll make my details available at the end of the session if you want to get in touch directly. So we're going to look at what are the options, cloud versus desktop, identifying the right solution for you, cloud security, what makes great software, how integration and expert advisors will set you up for success, extending the solution to delivering the best patient experience and unlocking the power of your PMS. And so you'll see sort of common themes between what Rafic and I are talking about, but that's because this is the stuff that you really need to know. So what are the options? Basically, there's three key things that we'll talk about. One is cloud, of course, but the other is desktop and having that hosted in your practice and remotely hosted. So I'll just explain what they are, some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks of each of them, and then we'll go into a little bit more detail. So desktop software, typically it's an on-premises solution. So you're buying a physical server, paying a few $1,000s for it and getting an expert IT person to set that up in your practice somewhere. So it's something that will require maintenance, that sort of thing, and has software installed on it that you've purchased. So one of the great things with this is you're not reliant on your internet connection. So if you are in a patchy area or you're going through a lot of trouble with internet, then this is a great solution. You've got physical control of the data, so you've got it sitting in a room and you know where it is. You're less reliant on third parties, so you're not tied to people. You can do what you like with that server. It's physically sitting there and you're in control of it. And it's a familiar experience. We've all used desktop software for years and years and years, so we know what to expect, and it's very familiar, it's easy, we know when we turn it on the computer, it's there. Some of the drawbacks are that there's an IT management overhead, so you need a really good IT provider to make sure that you've got a good experience, so it requires an ongoing relationship with them. You're limited with your mobility, so if you like to consult from lots of different locations, then you're sort of a bit restricted. You've got to come up with a way to remote into your practice or something like that. Your IT provider will help, but you've got to be aware of how that works. And it requires software upgrades and backups regularly. So that's another sort of task that you have to complete. If you look at remotely hosted servers, so essentially you're purchasing the same software as desktop, but instead of purchasing a server yourself and setting it up in your rooms, you're actually leasing it or sort of hiring it from someone. And so that's usually not stored in your practice. That's stored in a data center, in a secure warehouse somewhere. And the workstations in your practice don't really have the software installed locally. You all remote into where that data is stored elsewhere. So it's a good solution for people that want increased mobility, but it means you have to fully outsource all your IT management, which can be a little bit sort of costly sometimes. So one of the benefits of this option over a desktop solution in your own practice is you've got better security and hardware reliability usually, because someone's actively monitoring it all throughout the day and instantly get alerted to any changes in that system. So you've got a bit also more enterprise grade hardware in place there. Another benefit there is that it's easily scalable. So for people starting out, don't want to invest in a server, and they want to have the access to the data wherever they are. But they don't want to necessarily start with a full set of staff. They might add them over time. So this is easily scalable. It takes minutes for them to add additional users to the system for you. Some of the drawbacks, again, controls in the hands of the hosting vendor. So you really need to trust them. They have access to that server. It's sitting there on their equipment. And if you have any disagreement with them, you want to know that you can fully trust them, that they're going to give you access to that if you need to leave for whatever reason. The price I mentioned already, but the key thing here is it must be expertly executed. not just anyone can set this up. You really need to go to a trusted supplier who's going to connect you, someone that's really experienced in the medical space, which I'll talk about in a bit. And the last option there is cloud. And so this is, true SaaS products or software as a service. This is where you don't have to pay an IT person to host your data or to buy you a server. You go straight to the person that is supplying the software, and your data is stored in the cloud and you just access it via a web browser. So it's so nice and easy to get on wherever you are. There's no local installation, so really you could buy a brand new Mac from the Apple Store, open it up, connect it to Wi-Fi, and log into your cloud software. So you can access it as well from lots of different devices, which is great. So some of the benefits, you've got that mobility and ease of access, and this is one of the great things is you can just log in wherever you are easily. You don't have to worry too much about remote connections and that sort of stuff. Managed infrastructure and security updates. So we're talking about such high quality servers and equipment and really great maintenance of them that you're going to have a fantastic experience all throughout your use of the software. Obviously with the server that you might have, it can slow down over time. So this is going to be something that won't have those same issues. So it's a modern solution with user experience designed interface. So it's more focused on what it's like to use the software and less about just putting in all the features. So usually you've got a really, really nice experience using it. And it's faster to get going. So there's less setup time than the last two options. Some of the drawbacks with this are that you rely on the internet connection. So you really have to have great internet or have redundancy in place. You can tether to your mobile phone if your primary internet service goes down, but you have to make sure everyone in the practice can do something like that. You've got less control over your data. You still own it, or you're the custodian of that. Obviously, Rafic mentioned we're all sort of members of the MSI, the Medical Industry Software Association, and part of that is freedom to access of your data. But you are putting that control in someone else's hands. It's not the same as having it physically in a room next to you. It uses newer technology, and it's an emerging market. So always with newer technology and emerging markets, things change and you don't know what's going to happen next. So it's always something to watch closely. And there's usually less features than well-established software, simply because over time they've added in a lot of great functionality. So the question really isn't cloud or desktop, it's what's the right solution for you. So we definitely have conversation with two surgeons, and one could walk out of the room and say, I'm going to get Genie, and the other will say, I'm going to get Gen 2, the cloud-based option. So it's really looking at what specifically you need to get out of the software. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of these points. So desktop's got this rich feature set. So it's been developed over years, and so you can do just about anything with it that you can think of. So you can add in customizable options. You can just do pretty much anything you can think of, and you're not waiting for that to be developed or that feature to be released. You've got hands-on control, so you've got that tangible server and backup drive. So you know it's in that room in the back office. I know when I take a backup and plug a drive in, I've physically got that hard drive with my data, my patients on there, and that makes me feel better at night. And some people need that. So that is sometimes a motivator for people to choose desktop software. They just don't trust the cloud yet. There's no internet connection required for this. Obviously, you want internet so that you've got ability to do online claiming with Medicare and health funds and those sort of things. But if your internet drops out, you can still keep consulting. There's no disruption to that. You're connected directly to scanners and DSLR cameras and those sort of things. So you've got really good integration with physical devices. So if you take a lot of pre-operative photographs, then you want those to synchronize straight into the software, you can do that sort of thing, which is really nice. They're trusted and proven solutions. They're familiar, like I mentioned. You've got access to experienced staff as well. So because the software's been around for so long, you have staff that have been already trained in it, used it for 10 years and know what they're doing. So in terms of starting up your own private practice, that's a really valuable asset to bring someone in that knows the software and knows how to run a business like that. And I mentioned it's highly customizable. Some things to consider: the server lifespan and costs. So servers really only last 5 years, and we usually see people that keep them for 8 years or sometimes more. And so that's not ideal. They really do need to be replaced. So you have to factor that cost in. There's the operating system compatibility, and when you do updates, you need to make sure that it's compatible and tested and that sort of thing. You require an IT provider. They have to be skilled and really, really helpful. You've got software maintenance, upgrades and backups. They're all your responsibility with desktop software. So you can outsource this to your IT provider, but ultimately you're the one that's standing in front of a patient if there's something gone wrong and you don't have access to the system. So you really want to make sure that you've got a great IT provider that can help you make sure your systems are running well. There's always going to be technical challenges. This can happen with cloud and desktop, but usually you'll find there's more room for error in systems where people can change things and customize things. There's typically a higher establishment cost, so initial outlay is a little bit higher because you've got to buy a server and all those other pieces, but it does pay off in the long run. And there's an increased risk of ransomware with desktop solutions, simply because you're relying on usually a smaller business, maintaining that server, managing your security and those sort of things. So it's a little bit of a riskier option unless you've got a really good person that's managing that on a regular basis. If we look at cloud, on the other hand, you've got that mobility, which people really love. I do a lot of the systems I use are desktop-based and cloud-based, and the cloud-based ones are great if you're out and about all the time. So if you're off to theatre or something and you want to check something, it's a great way to just open up on your phone and get information. So ease of access. It's carefree IT experience. You're not free from IT completely. You still need an IT person to make sure you've got antivirus and firewalls and that for the physical computers in your domain there, but you don't have to worry about them looking after your servers. It's a future-proof solution. There's nothing really future-proofed in the IT world, but it does use the latest technology. So it puts you a little bit ahead, making sure that you're not buying something that's outdated or anything like that. So that's really important. There's ease of integration. So being cloud-based, it makes it so much easier to connect into other systems. You've got a faster setup time. It's easy to swap out new computers, as I mentioned. You've got the improved health data ecosystem, so connecting into other systems so easily. There's a lower establishment cost, which is great for people that are new to private practice. Typically there's not the same outlay for purchasing equipment or anything like that. You've just got to sign up to the service, and it's a month-to-month arrangement usually. And then peace of mind. So the peace of mind really comes down to knowing my data's in the hands of a fantastic, trusted provider that is in charge of not just one piece of my sort of IT, they're in charge of my whole practice management software. So they're taking that full responsibility. Some things to consider. So needs constant internet access. Again, I just use my mobile phone to access Gen 2 whenever I'm out. So it's quite easy to just tether from my laptop to my phone and away I go. Something to think about though is the system availability and uptime. So basically you would want to look is there, I guess, demonstrable evidence that the provider you're looking at has good system uptime and that their system's available. It's really important to know where the data's stored as well. So is your data stored within Australia or is it stored elsewhere overseas? So that's actually really important. And as a patient, I'd always want my data to be stored in Australia rather than elsewhere. So it just makes me feel safer knowing where it's stored. High level of security, but you don't know the person who's managing it. So you get a much higher quality level of security, but you don't know the person, you've not met that person who might be responsible for managing it and checking that system. And so a lot of the time trust comes from having a good relationship with that person, but you never actually get to see them in this case. So it's, I guess you're putting a lot of faith in the business that you're partnering with here. Long-term spend will be a little bit higher than desktop. It offers less customization usually. Obviously over time that will improve. And if the system's offline, you need to think about how you'll see patients. So really, if you're having a consulting session and your internet drops out or the system goes down for whatever reason, how are you going to continue your practice? What's your plan B there? So that's something to think about. I will very briefly talk about security in the cloud. In particular, I'm going to talk about Amazon Web Services because that's who Jeannie uses to host the data, so I know about what they provide. So this only really applies to Gen 2, not cloud products in general. So basically, a lot of people don't know much about cloud security and how it works and what it means. So just to give you a bit more insight, the data is encrypted. So it's encrypted when it's stored, but also as it travels around the internet, all the way to your web browser from the data center where it's stored. And it also actually makes sure the data always remains in Australia, so it never goes outside of Australian shore. Network security, so you're looking at industrial scale firewall technology that's specifically designed to prevent threats from breaching your system. So you've got proactive threat monitoring and blocking and response. So these are automated systems that basically are there to watch out for you 24/7. You've got daily backups stored in multiple locations. So you've got redundancy across multiple sites, which is great. So if your data is stored in New South Wales and Victoria and New South Wales disappears from the map for whatever reason, basically you've got a redundant copy in another state that can be fired up and accessed quickly. Usually they're an automated failover service that's in place. You've got service security, so specialized lockdown operating systems. So these are not running, a Windows server component or something like that. This is their own technology, which makes them really, really hard to get in. And the servers are distributed across multiple data centers. You've got physical security as well. So you've got video surveillance, environmental damage protection, uninterruptible backup power, and climate control. So just to give you a sense of the scale of what happens in the back end, there's quite a lot going into making sure the data is secure. So you've looked at the software and you've looked at the security side and you're looking at desktop and cloud, but what else is it that you need to look for when choosing software? So it's choosing the right company. So looking for a software provider that's focused on a specialist market and has a trusted history in the marketplace is really, really important. You don't want to go with a really small company or someone that's come in from overseas maybe and isn't familiar with what's required here. That would be quite risky to your practice. Also looking at the support hours that meet your needs. So making sure there's a great help desk. So we've got about 35 people based in our Brisbane office answering phones. So tracking that and looking at basically, can you access all of that information? If you're stuck with something, you want to call up, can they help you? You really want to know that. We also measure customer satisfaction and Net Promoter Score, and that's really important. So anyone that's in the service industry measures each customer interaction and checks in how did we do. And that's really important, and that shows that the company is taking the customer service aspect seriously, and that means you're important to that business. So it's a really key thing to measure. I always like to look for Australian-based development team. So again, that ensures your data is never sent overseas, but it also means that you get to have developers that can talk to the people who are out on the phones answering support calls. They can have a meeting with a trainer that's been out training in a practice and get accurate live feedback from customers. So it's really helpful. Looking at local representation as well. So it's about making sure that you get the training in person if you need it, or through Zoom in the current situation, but local people that know your business. And so it's great to know that the person that set up your software is sort of a around the corner and can actually answer some of the questions and come back and check on you and know how you're going. So you have that really great relationship with the local team. Choosing a company that uses customer feedback to drive design is also really important, and goes straight into the product roadmap, and that way you know the features that are coming into the software, things that you're asking for. And again, security is a pretty big thing. So once you've got the right company, you've got the right software, you want to look for the company that's also got the right integrations and advisors. And so these are just some of the providers. Obviously there's heaps more, but these are some of the ones that integrate with our desktop and cloud software on the top. So integration means automation and getting information in a timely way, being able to get data out in a timely way. So Rafic mentioned about referral letters, getting back in a timely way. So sending them electronically through a secure message delivery service is really, really key. So having the ability to plug into all these things seamlessly is really, really important. And then the other thing that usually a company that's got the experience that you're looking for would also have great relationships with advisors. So on the lower half of that screen, some of our certified advisors. So we've got IT providers that can help you with hosted servers being installed, just troubleshooting, just general things like that. And then we've got practice management consultants in there as well. So Health Business Network and Hox and My Practice Services. So if you're looking for help with things like marketing or something like that, you can reach out to a certified advisor and know that they're familiar with Genie and Gen 2 and that they're experienced and know how to get data from your system to help you do things like marketing. And then the next thing is you want software that's also going to help you deliver the best patient experience. So I've put a few different things here in a random order, but we've got patient payments powered by Easy Debit. So it's about delivering integrated in-person and online payments, meaning patients can pay their out-of-pocket for procedures and things like that anywhere at any time. So they don't need to phone up the practice and have someone process their credit card over the phone, which is what a lot of people do. Specialist bookings powered by HotDoc. So the ability to book online is fantastic. It frees up your admin team's time to answer the phone for people that really want to call and need to chat about something. So basically, if you just want to book in, you can do that quite easily with something like HotDoc, and that connects straight into the software. We've also got Teleconsult powered by Amazon Chime. So that basically means you'll be able to have the teleconsult session launched straight from within your software. So you don't need to go to a different piece of software and log in or anything like that. You'll just click on the clinical file, click on the Start Consult button, and you'll have a session going. And then there's also online patient registration forms. And so that's, again, about improving your patient experience, as all of these things do. So this will allow you to basically have new patients register online. All of their fields will come straight into the software, and you won't have to key that data in or scan it in or anything like that. It's all done for you. So you can throw away those clipboards and pens that people have to fill in. So when you tie all these things together, you've got a really, really pleasant patient experience. They've booked in online with HotDoc for their appointment. They've been sent their online patient registration form so that they can fill in their details. So they're informed already about what's happening at the consult and fees and that sort of thing. You've had your teleconsult with them, and they've had a great experience there. It's a fantastic video audio experience, and then they can pay just by being emailed an invoice securely and tap to pay. So if you're like me, I have my credit card saved in my iPhone. So as soon as I get an email through one of these, I just tap pay now, and it puts in all the dollar amounts for you. And that then receipts back off into your practice management software. So, these are the kinds of things that you're looking for. So once you've got the software, what's next? So basically with practice management software, a lot of people get it but don't really use it to the full advantage. So your daily PMS usage is basically building a data set that gives you valuable insights into your business. So 3 months in, you're going to start getting really good information, basically. So think about how you measure your success and set targets that are meaningful to you, and then measure against key business drivers. So If your goal is to deliver fantastic patient healthcare, then you can set a target around that and run reports on the procedure outcomes and that sort of thing. If your goal is to find the right balance for you to spend more time with your kids and your family and make sure you're still delivering a certain amount of sort of consults and procedures each week, then you can do that. So you just have to choose sort of what's the right fit and the reason that you're going into private practice, and make sure your targets and things are aligned to that. One thing I do see people do regularly is they don't just rely, they rely just on ad hoc reporting, which makes them feel like they're in control, but they don't really know what's happening in their business. So it's really important to have a set of reports that you're looking at regularly and comparing, so you've got a really deep understanding of what's happening in your business. Embedding efficiency and automation in your practice is really, really important. So invest a little bit of time in customizing and making sure that your processes are great and make sense, and then look at what administrative tasks can be automated and do that. So the top reports for new surgeons, things like referral trends. So recognising first-time referrers is so important. So the first time you get a referral from a particular GP, you need to reach out to them and thank them for that, and really start building that relationship. And if there's a decrease in referrals from someone that regularly referred to you, ask them why. So actually being able to identify these things in your system is really important. Looking at future booking trends and appointments, making sure you've got a consistent and even flow of new patients, review patients, and theatre cases. So you're not bombarded with all new patients one week, just reviews the next week, and then your theatre list might be blank. And you want to make sure that you're looking forward to what's coming up, and your software will help you do that. Looking at payment receipts, outstanding patient and health fund accounts, but also knowing for you and your type of practice, what debt level is normal for your practice, what's the normal amount of outstanding accounts, and then watching that and seeing if it's climbing. If it's climbing, something's gone wrong. Someone's either not processing claims correctly, or they're not following up outstanding accounts. And then looking at the geographic patient and referral spread. And just as an example, if you look at this map, I've put a practice location, that's where our office is. Being able to extract data like this from your software is vital. So being able to plot anonymized data, of course, onto your maps, and being able to see who your referring doctors are, and then looking at where your patients are. This will help inform you about whether it's worthwhile continuing to consult in a particular location, or if you're focusing in the wrong area. Obviously, there's not much data here because it's a sample, but being able to pull this and look at your patients and the spread, it might really open your eyes into a space that you're not really tapping into. But also you can put in additional data here. So you might bring in more local businesses that are GP referring practices that haven't referred to you. And then you'd be able to see sort of where you're missing out, who you need to approach, because there'll always be a cluster of patients from their local GP, so they won't typically travel too far to see them. So key things to remember are choosing what's right for you. It doesn't necessarily mean cloud or desktop, but it is choosing the one that's the right fit for you. Go with a market leading trusted business. So that's really, really important. Take advantage of integrations and certified advisors. Aim to deliver the best possible patient experience, because they will tell their GP about the experience they've had, and that will lead to an increase in referrals. And then tap into the power of the reporting capabilities of your practice management software. So if you'd love to continue the conversation, normally we get to chat in person, but if not, very welcome to get in touch with Paddy, our Victorian State Manager, or myself to keep talking about Jeannie and Gen 2. I love talking about it. So you're very welcome to get in touch.
Thanks so much, Steve, for that wonderful presentation. So as you can see tonight so far, both our speakers have highlighted to you the, the different properties of cloud-based as well as desktop-based practice software. And we hope that this gives you a better perspective on some of the important things to consider when you're actually choosing what's the right fit for your practice. I'd now like to welcome my co-moderator, Mr. Patrick Lowe. As you know, it's become a common theme in our webinar presentations for Patrick and myself to share with you some of our own personal experiences and, discuss some of the things that have influenced us in choosing our practice software. So I'd like to firstly invite Patrick to sort of give his perspectives on this topic before we can then proceed on to some of the really interesting questions that have been sent through to us during tonight's session. So Patrick, take it away.
Thanks very much, Marilyn, and thank you, Rafic and Stephen. Very enjoyable and informative talk. Stephen, you used the naughty word cluster. It's very raw at the moment. Please don't use that word, okay? Very, very bad for Victorians at the moment. Where were you guys 25 years ago? So when I started training, a desktop really is a desktop. Okay, so we had files, we had manila folders with all the details, and then we bring it out and see patients. Okay, that was our desktop. When I came back from fellowship from Toronto, I had a total sum of $0. So my choice of practice software was guided by the amount of money that I had to spend on it. So cost dictated it. And I think a lot of the younger fellows, those starting out, will be in the same situation. But really think ahead. Yeah, it won't be 0 5 years from now. So start looking really into what would suit you. Work out what your practice will be like, and you'll have some idea by now how you're going to manage your patients and how you're going to set up your surgical practices. So, as Stephen said, there is no one right program, one right software. Just choose the one that's perfect for you. And you may have to go through several mistakes. So when Stephen showed that slide of the 3 models, I went through those 3 models. I started off as a purely desktop, office-based environment, and then slowly things changed. It got a bit busier. The cost of paper went up. Okay, so filing things like that was very difficult. So then I went on to the sort of server model, and eventually partly into cloud, partly into server. I've got this little hybrid where I've got a bit in the server where I can store extremely sensitive stuff, and then others day-to-day running through cloud. You will find something that's right for you, but I also take I'm sure everyone will have the same question: security, security, security. I mean, that's that's what we base our practice on. We've got to keep our patients' data safe, and like the same theme that we've mentioned throughout all the webinars. Please ask. Ask Rafic about the cloud situation. Ask Stephen about GD. What are their security protocols? Really dig into it, because after all, it is your patient's data that's at play here. So I can't stress that enough, and I'm sure that all your colleagues, all your teachers, everyone will be saying to you, please be sure that you are safe. Right? So apart from that, the only other thing I've got to say is please be adaptable. For so long at the start, I was steered down one path, mainly because the guys that I was with were using this program. So went down this path and found out that the software was more medical based. So it's fantastic for the physicians, where they can have long lunches and then have time to go through all the stuff. But surgeons, we are go, 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 go. So, it wasn't right for me. Eventually, light bulb moment. Oh, Genie sounds good. Okay, so I went down that path, and I haven't looked back. But please be adaptable, and that's a key to what we are as surgeons. We are adaptable. Thanks, Marilyn.
Thanks very much, Patrick. I 100% agree with you. I think it's really important not to rush into making a quick decision. One of the most important things that I did, now looking back now, I feel it was one of the most important things, is I actually trialled the different options. And I would encourage you to do that, because it's very different how we find comfort in using a particular system and how our colleagues find comfort in using that system. And, you know, you can take as much feedback from them as possible. And I think that's a really good thing, but as no substitute for trying it out yourself and seeing how, you know, how it fits with your own skills and knowledge and practice sort of aspirations. The only other comment to make is always be mindful that this software that you then go and choose is also going to need to be used by your practice administration staff. So, you know, whatever type of software you pick, make sure that you organise for your practice staff to be well trained in it, because at the end of the day, they're probably going to use it more than you do in certain respects, and particularly the billing side of things, the downloading of the pathology and the radiology side of things, you know, the letters. So they really need to be on the front foot in terms of knowing the functionalities of the software. And I think it's really important when things get updated, and, you know, there are constant updates that you will receive information about, regardless of which system you actually subscribe to. You got to make sure that the staff are actually practicing the updates, etc., and actually, you know, knowing how they work. So our two presenters, Rafic and Steve, have left their contact details with us, and they'll be available on the website. So if you've got any specific questions, then, you know, please feel free to email them through to us, and we will we'll forward them on and get responses back to you. So we'd now like to open the discussion up and invite Rafic and Steve to join us for a short Q&A. So we've got a couple of questions, and I'd like to throw the first one to the both of you. Steve, I might ask you to comment first, and then Rafic for this particular question. So the first question from one of our attendees says, I've seen some practices using eFax. Are there data security issues with this, as the patient data is saved by the eFax system and it may actually be held overseas?
Yeah.
Steve, could you comment on that?
Sure. So it's a good question, and yes, it is potentially stored overseas, and probably is. So it's not something I would want my personal health data shared through, and eFax is really a stopgap measure for practices that are trying to avoid having to print out and manually fax stuff to another practice, and it's typically because the recipient isn't set up for secure message delivery. Personally, I'd want to avoid it if possible, and, you know, look at other methods, and even just password protecting PDF documents that you might be sending out electronically would be probably a better option than actually using an eFax.
Okay,
service.
thanks, Steve. Rafic, any comments on that, on that question from your end?
In line with that. So the issue with sending electronic fax is it's going via email, so it's not typically encrypted, and it carries its risks as well. So yeah, I agree with that sentiment.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the next question is about where the legal responsibilities lie. So Rafic, if I could get your comments on this question, and that is, who is legally responsible for data breaches when we're using a cloud-based office software system? And what's the backup?
At a system level, I'd imagine haven't taken advice on that, but at a system level, we would be responsible. Like if it was at a high level, like from a platform perspective, obviously we can't be responsible if someone in the practice printed something out and sent it. We can't be responsible for that. But at a system level, we are. And from a backup perspective, we use Microsoft Azure, and our primary data center is in Melbourne. And everything that you upload to our environment gets backed up 3 times in Melbourne, and it gets replicated to Sydney as well.
Okay.
So that's so the backups that these guys offer, the Microsofts and the Amazons of the world, are superior to anything else that small companies can't possibly match.
Okay. So can I just ask you then, is there potential to lose entire patient databases in the event of someone successfully hacking that system?
I can't see that. I can't see that as a possibility. It's hard to say nothing's impossible, but I can't see it as a possibility when you look at cloud solutions. We are, like, obviously I understand the architecture and it's hard to articulate that, but the way it's designed, the way it's backed up, the layers of security, because we use Microsoft's infrastructure. They have layers and layers and layers, and then even then each cell is encrypted. So so the Mr. or the Mrs. is encrypted. So there are layers. So these are to give you perspective, they spent about $100 billion building data centers to make them safe for companies like us to use, and you know, governments struggle to match that sort of investment.
Okay, great, thanks. Steve, from your perspectives, because you talked about both cloud and non-cloud, sure. Who's responsible for the data breaches when you're using a cloud-based software system, and how do you sort of back that up?
Yeah. So Rafic's spot on with what he's talked about there. So it usually comes down to where the point of the breach is. And if it's through negligence of staff leaving a computer unattended or hitting send on an email to the wrong person and copying in patients and things like that, absolutely that's the responsibility of the practice staff. If there's a vulnerability that's exposed through negligence of the software vendor, through not patching software gaps that they've been made aware of or something like that, then that is the responsibility of that software vendor.
Okay, so when we're talking about the cloud version, say of Gen 2, for example, Steve, can you comment, are the integrations, you know, like the payments, bookings, etc., are they only available with the cloud versions of software, or
sure.
You know?
No, they're not. So a lot of the time when features are developed that are already in the cloud, things like Easy Debit and Hot Docs, because they're web-based services, they connect into systems through obviously an API or some equivalent. With desktop software, you have a component like Genie has, which is a cloud adapter, and essentially it can connect your practice to the cloud, so you can take advantage of development that's done for both products. Doesn't really matter which one you're on.
Okay.
So they may land with one or the other ahead of the other, just depending on product development with each team that works on them, but they're usually available to both.
Great. And Rafic, any comments on the integration side of it for your...
Only available in the cloud solution.
Sorry?
Sorry, I was being facetious. I only got one product.
Yeah.
But
any comments on the integration part of it? You know, is it something that staff need? You know, sort of a prolonged period of training on, like, and what training programs and things do you actually run for practitioners who are taking up, say, your cloud-based practice system?
Good question. So training is important. Probably if you rewind back 3, 4 years or 5 years when we started, we thought we could do everything remotely. We've changed tact. We've got a lot more people now. We're about 120 people company. So we've got what we call squads on the ground. So we've got teams in Victoria, Melbourne, Brisbane, etc. And those teams are responsible for training customers. And training is important. And as I said in my presentation, we can't underestimate that change management piece.
And what's the average sort of training time that the staff will require? Like, is it a day? Is it a week? A couple of hours a week? I mean, how does that?
You made a very good point earlier, Marlon. You said, the doctor's side, the doctors are very motivated. Obviously, it's their business. So the adoption piece is very quick. To get a doctor going on the doctor's app, on the doctor app on the mobile, probably 10 minutes, right? And then after that, you're spending your night going through it on your own and you work it out. On the practice admin side of things, there's a lot more involved, and it needs to be staged. So it could be, depending on the size of the practice, it could be 1 day, it could be 5 days, whatever's required.
Okay, great. Steve, what about for Genie and Gen 2? What's the sort of the training programs that you offer? And average sort of times to get familiar with, for the staff to get familiar with them.
Yeah, so similar to Rafic, we've got local representation in most states, and the trained teams there are highly trained to, I guess, deliver the best experience for you. So they'll work closely usually with your practice manager or yourself to understand exactly what you need in the short term and long term. If you're starting private practice, sometimes you need a little bit less. You just need a little bit to get going, and then you want to, when you hire someone, that's when you want to get more training. So we tend to work with you and customize it a little bit to make sure that we're not giving you more than what you need when you're starting, and that the training is going to the right person. There's no point training a surgeon to do their own billing when they might only be doing that for short term, and they want to hand that over as quickly as they can to a practice manager or a secretary or someone that they're employing. What's really important though is the follow-ups that come with that. So making sure that you do get a sort of a check-in from those local teams that help set you up, and having a great relationship with your state manager. So if you do need more help, just put your hand up and say, I would love some more help, because that's what they're there for. They don't just do the setup and training, they're ongoing support essentially. Thanks
very much, Steve. Now, there have been a couple of questions tonight about costings, and I think some of those details are probably going to need to be individualised depending on if you're a sole practitioner and how many staff you've got or plan to have working with you. So if you do have any specific questions about costing, please send them through to our presenters, and we will actually forward them on, and I'm sure that they will be able to reach out to you and get that valuable and very important information back to you. So before we close this Q&A session and this webinar tonight, I just want to find out from Patrick whether there's any other comments or questions that he wants to throw it out to speakers.
No, that's very comprehensive. Very, very good talks. Thank you for that.
Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us today. Thanks especially to both Steve and Rafic for your insightful presentations. We will put the recordings of today's webinar on the website, and you can download and watch them. The next Prep for Practice webinar is going to be next Tuesday, the 28th of July at 7 p.m. And we're going to be discussing the finer points of working as a new surgeon with your private hospitals, how you can get the most out of those interactions. We would love to have your feedback about today's webinar, because as you know, we use this information to try and improve every webinar that we run for you, and to actually tailor it to what you would like answered, rather than the information that we feel that people want to hear. So please fill in your feedback forms and send them back to us with any comments that you'd like to leave. As you know, today's webinar attendance can count towards your CPD. So it's in Category 3, Maintenance of Skills and Knowledge. So on that note, I would like to thank Patrick and Rafic and Steve, as well as our behind the scenes workers who are Virginia and Catherine, who keep everything running so smoothly in the background, and who do such enormous work in the preparation for each webinar. So thank you, special thank you to all of you, and have a good night, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.